The impossible breach. The void between stars erupted as the ESS Artemis tore through the fabric of space, its quantum drive screaming in protest. On the bridge, Commander Sarah Chen's knuckles whitened against her chair's armrests as warning lights bathed the command deck in crimson. The ship wasn't designed for this kind of blind jump. No human vessel was. Drive stability at 28% and falling. Lieutenant Park reported from engineering, his voice steady despite the circumstances. We've got maybe 10 minutes before total collapse. Sarah absorbed the information without taking her eyes off the main display. The Artemis's sensors were still recalibrating after the jump, but they already showed what she'd feared. They'd emerged deep in Nexian space, surrounded by the most advanced civilization humanity had ever encountered. And they'd just crashed their party. Multiple contacts. Senior Officer Rivera announced from Tactical, her hands dancing across holographic controls. 12 Nexian vessels, cruiser class and larger. They're moving to establish a containment formation. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. The Nexians, with their crystalline ships and quantum-locked minds, were the epitome of order and precision. Every move they made followed protocols established over millennia of space warfare. That made them powerful and predictable. Status of the diplomatic package, she asked, turning to Communications Officer Katsumi, whose augmented eyes flickered with streams of data. Encoded and ready, he confirmed. But the Nexians are jamming all standard frequencies. They're not interested in talking. Of course they weren't. To the Nexians, humanity was barely more than an upstart species that had stumbled onto FTL travel. They'd made their position clear during the first contact. Submit to guidance or stay in your own territory. But they didn't know what Sarah knew. What the Artemis carried in its data cores. Begin emergency drive purge, Sarah ordered, earning startled looks from her bridge crew. Vent the quantum plasma in a dispersal pattern. Make it look like critical damage. Understanding dawned on Rivera's face. They'll think we're about to lose containment. Standard Nexian protocol would require them to maintain safe distance while continuing their containment strategy. Sarah finished, giving us just enough room to work with. The Artemis shuddered as superheated plasma began venting into space, creating a brilliant azure cloud around the ship. Through the swirling energy, Sarah caught glimpses of the Nexian vessels, massive crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, each one capable of obliterating the Artemis with a single shot. Commander, Park's voice carried an edge of concern. That was our last jump's worth of fuel. If this doesn't work, it has to work. Sarah cut him off. The invasion fleet we detected. Earth doesn't stand a chance against them. But the Nexians might, if they'd just listen. The bridge fell silent save for the hum of equipment and the occasional creak of stressed hull plating. Everyone knew the stakes. 2 weeks ago, the Artemis had detected massive quantum wake signatures at the edge of human space. The analysis was conclusive. An armada was coming, larger than anything in known space. Not Nexian. Something else. Something worse. The Nexians, for all their arrogance, were humanity's best hope for survival. If only they'd look past their prejudices long enough to see the evidence. Nexian vessels adjusting formation, Rivera reported. They're maintaining distance but tightening the net. No weapons lock yet. Sarah nodded. Time for Phase 2. Katsumi, prepare a tight beam transmission, old Earth protocol. Something they won't expect to see out here. Mom. Katsumi's augmented eyes whirled in confusion. Morse code, she clarified, right through their quantum jamming. Sometimes the oldest solutions work best. As Katsumi worked, Sarah watched the Nexian ships through the plasma cloud. Their crystalline hulls caught the light of distant stars, creating rainbow refractions that belied their deadly nature. The Nexians valued order above all else. It was built into their very biology, their quantum-locked neural networks operating with perfect synchronization. That was their weakness. Message ready, Katsumi announced. Send it to all of them. Let's see how their perfect order handles a little chaos. The message was simple. 3 words in ancient dots and dashes, transmitted directly to each Nexian ship simultaneously through the quantum plasma interference. 3 words that would either save humanity or doom the Artemis crew to a very short future. Something is coming. The response was immediate. The Nexian formation wavered, their perfect geometric pattern disrupting as individual ships processed the unexpected transmission. In their quantum-linked minds, the same thought would be repeating, cascading through their collective consciousness. Impossible. Primitive. Urgent. They're scanning us, Rivera reported, excitement creeping into her voice. Full spectrum. They've never done that before. They're actually looking at us. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Now we show them why they should listen. Katsumi, transmit the full data package. Everything we have on the invasion fleet. And add a personal message. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Words that might determine the fate of 2 civilizations. Tell them, order falls to chaos when it stands alone. Together, we become something new. The Artemis hung in space, venting drive plasma like a wounded animal, as humanity's message raced across the void to their most powerful potential allies. Sarah Chen watched the Nexian ships and waited, knowing that the next few moments would either mark a new chapter in human history or its final page. The space around them grew still, filled with possibility and danger in equal measure. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the bravest thing wasn't charging into battle or making a desperate stand. Sometimes, it was simply reaching out a hand in the darkness, hoping someone would take it. Calculated chaos. Time stretched like a wire-pulled taut as the Artemis crew waited for the Nexians' response. The quantum plasma clouds surrounding their ship had begun to dissipate, leaving them increasingly exposed. Commander Sarah Chen counted heartbeats, watching the crystalline vessels through the clearing haze. The response, when it came, wasn't what anyone expected. Multiple quantum signatures. Rivera's hands flew across her tactical display. They're powering up their drives, but this isn't any formation I've seen in their playbook. The massive Nexian ships began to move, their crystalline structures catching starlight as they shifted position. But instead of the precise geometric patterns they normally favored, their movements seemed almost organic, flowing like liquid crystal through space. They're adapting, Sarah whispered, realization dawning. They're actually adapting. The main display suddenly flared with new energy signatures. Through the quantum interference came a transmission, not in any human language or standard Nexian code, but in the same primitive Morse code they'd used. Prove it. They want evidence. Katsumi translated unnecessarily, his augmented eyes spinning rapidly. But Commander, our long-range sensor data is still encrypted in the damaged drive core. We can't access it without power. Sarah finished. She took a deep breath, weighing options that all seemed equally desperate. Lieutenant Park, how much emergency power can you give me? Maybe 3 minutes at full capacity. Park's voice came back, strained. But that would mean shutting down life support. We'd be betting our lives on whatever you're planning. Sarah's eyes locked onto the nearest Nexian vessel. Its crystalline surface had begun pulsing with subtle patterns of light, their version of active scanning. They were curious. For the first time in known history, the Nexians were truly curious about humans. That's exactly what we're going to do, she decided. Rivera, plot me a course through their formation. Katsumi, prepare to broadcast everything we have the moment power comes back online. Park, on my mark. Shut it all down except bridge controls and minimal gravity. Commander, Rivera's voice held a note of concern. Without active sensors, we'll be flying blind through their formation. One miscalculation and we won't be flying blind. Sarah cut her off. We'll be flying on faith. Their faith in order, and our faith in chaos. The bridge crew exchanged glances, but their hands moved to comply. They'd followed Sarah into impossible situations before. This was just another Tuesday at the office. If your office happened to be deep in hostile alien territory, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. Executing shutdown in 3, 2, 1. The Artemis went dark. Emergency lighting cast faint red shadows across the bridge as life support systems wound down. In the sudden quiet, Sarah could hear her crew's breathing, slightly faster than normal but steady. Professional. Ready. Now, Rivera. Take us in. Without active sensors, without shields, without even life support, the Artemis began to move. Through the main viewport, Sarah watched the massive Nexian ships loom larger. Their crystalline hulls now blazed with energy patterns, tracking the human vessel's approach. They're maintaining position, Rivera reported, her voice tight with concentration as she flew on visual data alone. Whatever they're thinking with those quantum-locked minds of theirs, they're letting us make the first move. The Artemis threaded through the Nexian formation like a needle through crystalline cloth. Each massive alien ship they passed cast rainbow refractions across the bridge, painting human faces in alien light. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and they'd be atomized. But Sarah had counted on something fundamental about the Nexians. Their absolute dedication to order made them predictable even when they tried to be unpredictable. Their ships held position with quantum precision, creating a pattern that, while complex, could be navigated by human intuition. 30 seconds of air left. Park warned from engineering. Whatever we're doing, it better work fast. The Artemis reached the center of the Nexian formation. Sarah's lungs were beginning to burn from the thinning air when she gave the order. Now, Park. Everything we've got. Power surged back through the ship. Life support whirred to life as atmosphere rushed back into depleted compartments. And most importantly, the damaged drive core spun up one last time. Broadcasting sensor data. Katsumi confirmed, his augmented eyes streaming information. They're receiving. Commander, they're all receiving. Every ship in the formation is taking in our data simultaneously. On the main display, the energy patterns across the Nexian ships' hulls changed. The rhythmic pulses became erratic, then synchronized into something new. A cascade of light that spread from ship to ship like a neural network processing new information. They're analyzing it in real time, Sarah realized. Their entire fleet is functioning as one massive quantum computer. The light show continued for several tense moments. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The Nexian ships went dark, save for a soft, steady glow, a color none of them had seen before. A new message arrived, again in Morse code. We see. Before anyone could react, space itself seemed to twist around them. Sarah felt a moment of vertigo as reality bent, and suddenly the Artemis was somewhere else. A massive crystalline dock inside what appeared to be a Nexian station. A final message blinked across their screens. Teal'c. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked at her crew, saw the same mix of exhaustion and wonder on their faces that she felt herself. Well, she said, managing a small smile. Looks like we've been invited in. Let's not keep our host waiting. The real challenge, she knew, was just beginning. They'd gotten the Nexians' attention. Now they had to convince the most ordered species in known space to embrace a little chaos, before the coming storm swept them all away. The language of trust. The Nexian docking station defied human architectural logic. Crystalline corridors branched and merged in patterns that seemed to follow quantum probability rather than traditional design. As Commander Sarah Chen led her small delegation through the gleaming passages, she felt like she was walking through a frozen thought. Their entire station is one giant quantum computer, Lieutenant Park whispered, his engineer's eyes wide as he scanned the walls with his handheld devices. The crystalline structure itself processes information. It's beautiful. And probably analyzing our every move, Rivera added quietly. She'd insisted on coming as security, though her sidearm seemed woefully inadequate against the power humming through the station's walls. Sarah kept her focus ahead, where their Nexian escort glided smoothly across the crystalline floor. The alien's form was vaguely humanoid, but its body appeared to be composed of interlocking geometric shapes that shifted and realigned with each movement. Light pulsed through its crystalline structure in complex patterns, their primary form of communication. "Katsumi," Sarah murmured, "are you getting anything from those light patterns?" The communications officer nodded, his augmented eyes whirling as they processed the alien signals. "It's like quantum mathematics expressed as visual poetry. They're discussing us, but also monitoring the station, coordinating fleet movements, and about 1,000 other things simultaneously. Their minds are as networked as their technology." The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The walls were alive with cascading light patterns, and in the center floated what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. But unlike any map she'd seen before, this one showed quantum probability streams flowing between stars like rivers of light. 3 more Nexians awaited them, their crystalline forms more elaborate than their escorts. Leaders, Sarah guessed, or perhaps scientists. The light patterns flowing through them were extraordinarily complex. "Welcome, humans of the Artemis." The patterns resolved into words in their minds, presumably translated through the station's systems. "You have brought chaos to our order. Now explain why we should not simply eliminate the disruption." Sarah stepped forward, conscious of the weight of this moment. Everything. Earth's survival, humanity's future, perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself, hinged on what happened in this room. "We brought chaos because order alone cannot survive what's coming," she said clearly. "Show them, Katsumi." The communications officer interfaced with the station's systems, and the galactic map transformed. New probability streams appeared. Massive quantum wakes approaching from intergalactic space. The Nexians' light patterns intensified as they processed the data. "These readings are impossible," they communicated. "No known species possesses such capability." "No known species in our galaxy," Sarah corrected. "But space is vast, and we've all been looking in the wrong direction. While we fought among ourselves, something noticed our quantum emissions. Something old. Something hungry." The map zoomed in on the approaching signatures. Even as they watched, new data from the Nexian fleet's quantum sensors added detail to the projection. The scale was staggering. Thousands of ships, each larger than anything in known space. "Why bring this to us?" the Nexians asked. "Your species and ours have no foundation of trust." "Because you understand order," Sarah replied, "and we understand chaos. This enemy appears to use both. Quantum technology more advanced than yours, deployed with an adaptability that mirrors humanity's. Neither of us can face this alone. Together, we might have a chance." The Nexian's light patterns shifted to colors she hadn't seen before. They were communicating among themselves at quantum speeds, processing possibilities, calculating probabilities. Sarah waited, knowing that pushing them would only disrupt their analysis. Finally, one of them approached her, its crystalline form reconfigured until it was closer to human height, a gesture whose significance wasn't lost on Sarah. "Show us," it communicated, "how chaos and order can coexist." Sarah smiled. "Lieutenant Park, would you explain to our hosts how humans adapted Nexian quantum drive technology?" Park stepped forward eagerly, pulling up schematics on his tablet. "Traditional Nexian drives operate on perfect quantum harmonics," he began. "But we found that introducing controlled instabilities actually improved efficiency by 13%. By embracing controlled chaos within an ordered system." The Nexians' light patterns flared with what Sarah could have sworn was surprise. Their forms shifted closer, examining Park's data with intense interest. The quantum streams in the galactic maps, unity through fire. The Nexian command center hummed with quantum activity as humans and aliens worked side by side, their shadows dancing in the light of 1,000 probability streams. Commander Sarah Chen stood before the galactic display, watching the enemy fleet's approach vector with growing concern. In the 12 hours since their alliance began, the invaders had covered distance that should have taken days. "They're using some kind of cascading quantum slip," Lieutenant Park explained. his hands moving through holographic equations alongside his Nexian counterpart. Each ship's wake creates a slipstream for the ones behind it. The more ships they have, the faster they move. Like birds flying in formation, Sarah mused, but with quantum physics. The Nexian next to Park, who they'd started calling Crystal due to its particularly intricate lattice structure, pulsed with recognition. You create order from chaos even in your metaphors. We begin to understand why your species survived despite its limitations. Sarah had learned to recognize the slight variation in light patterns that indicated Nexian humor. They were learning from each other, but time was running out. The invasion fleet would reach the edge of Nexian space within hours. "Commander," Katsumi's voice carried across the chamber. "You need to see this." Sarah moved to the communication station, where Katsumi's augmented eyes were processing streams of quantum data. The Nexians had integrated his cybernetics into their systems, allowing him to perceive their quantum communications directly. The mental strain was enormous, but he'd insisted he could handle it. "We've decoded more of their quantum emissions," he reported, his voice tight with concentration. "They're not just communicating. They're transforming space itself. Every ship in their fleet is connected in a quantum network that makes the Nexian collective look like children's toys." The nearest Nexian flashed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as indignation, but Crystal intervened with a calming pulse pattern. "The human speaks truth. Their technology suggests development over millions of years. They have achieved what we thought impossible: perfect quantum coherence across an entire fleet." "Perfect coherence means perfect predictability," Sarah said slowly, an idea forming. "Lieutenant Park, what happens to a quantum system when you introduce an unexpected variable?" Park's eyes widened. "The coherence collapses. But, Commander, to affect a quantum field that size, we'd need everything we have," Sarah finished. She turned to Crystal. "Your fleet's quantum drives, synchronized with human chaos theory. A disruption they can't predict because it follows no logical pattern." Crystal's light patterns cascaded through complex calculations. "The energy requirements would be enormous. We would burn out most of our drives in the attempt." "Better than letting them burn out our civilizations," Sarah countered. "Besides, humans are good at doing more with less. Show them, Park." The engineer pulled up schematics of the Artemis's jerry-rigged quantum drive. "We've been running quantum technology at 30% higher efficiency than theoretical limits by introducing controlled instabilities. If we apply the same principles to your entire fleet..." Crystal's patterns shifted to deep ultraviolet. The first time Sarah had seen that particular response. "You propose to upgrade our entire fleet with untested modifications in the hours before battle." "That's another human specialty," Sarah smiled grimly. "We do our best work under pressure." The chamber erupted in quantum communications as the Nexians processed the proposal. Sarah watched their light patterns shift and flow, seeing in their chaos something approaching human debate. They were changing, adapting just as humanity had to adapt. Perhaps that was the greatest victory already. "A question, Commander Chen." Crystal pulsed suddenly. "Your ship's data core contains classified human defense protocols. Why risk bringing them into our space? We could have easily extracted them during your capture." Sarah met the alien's crystalline gaze. "Because trust has to start somewhere. We believed you would choose survival over advantage." The Nexian's patterns synchronized briefly, their equivalent of contemplative silence. Then Crystal approached the galactic display and modified the tactical projections with a gesture. "We will begin fleet modifications immediately. However, there is another factor to consider." The display zoomed in on a sector near the invasion fleet's approach vector. "We detect quantum emissions similar to the enemy's, but smaller. Scout ships, we believe, arriving ahead of their main fleet. They will reach us within 2 hours. Then we'll have a chance to test our theory," Sarah said. "Park, grab your tools. Time to upgrade some quantum drives. Katsumi, I need you coordinating with the Nexian fleet. Rivera, work with their tactical systems. Let's give their gunners some human unpredictability. As her crew moved to their tasks, Sarah felt Crystal's attention on her. You appear energized by the approaching conflict. Not by the conflict, she corrected, by the challenge. Humans thrive on solving impossible problems. We have noticed. Crystal pulsed with that almost humor again. Perhaps that is why the universe brought our species together. Order alone grows stagnant. Chaos alone destroys itself. But together. Sarah watched humans and Nexians working as one across the command center, barriers of biology and physics falling before the greater threat they faced. Together, Crystal's patterns shifted to a new configuration, one that seemed to bridge the gap between geometric precision and organic flow. We become something new. Alert patterns suddenly pulsed through the station. On the galactic display, new quantum signatures blazed into existence. The scout ships had arrived early, their drives even more advanced than predicted. Sarah straightened her uniform. Well, Crystal, ready to show them what chaos and order can do together. The Nexian's response came in both light patterns and words. We stand ready, Commander Chen. Let us rewrite the laws of physics, together. The battle for two civilizations was about to begin, and Sarah Chen allowed herself a moment of pure human optimism. They might be outgunned and outnumbered, facing technology millions of years ahead of their own, but they had something the enemy couldn't predict: the impossible partnership of humanity's controlled chaos and the Nexian's adaptive order. Sometimes, she reflected as she moved to the tactical station, the best weapon against a perfect enemy is imperfect allies. A new dawn. Space itself seemed to shudder as the scout ships dropped out of quantum slip. Their vessels defied conventional geometry, existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Through the Nexian command center sensors, they appeared as shifting patterns of probability rather than solid matter. By all that's logical, Crystal pulsed, its patterns reflecting something close to awe. They exist in quantum superposition even at macroscopic scale. Which means our weapons can't get a lock, Rivera added from the tactical station. Can't shoot what isn't definitively there. Commander Sarah Chen watched the scout ships approach on the galactic display. The combined human-Nexian fleet hung in defensive formation around the station, 30 vessels of crystalline beauty and improvised upgrades. Their modified quantum drives hummed with controlled instability, ready to execute a plan that bordered on insanity. All ships reporting ready, Katsumi announced, his augmented eyes streaming data from both human and Nexian sources. The quantum network modifications are holding stable. Mostly stable, he corrected as a surge of energy rippled through the fleet. Mostly stable is as good as we're going to get, Sarah said. She turned to Crystal. Time to test our theory. Signal the fleet. Execute pattern chaos. Crystal's patterns flickered with what might have been appreciation as it relayed the order. The combined fleet began to move, but not in the precise geometric formations the Nexians favored. Instead, each ship followed randomized vectors calculated using human chaos theory, their quantum drives purposefully out of sync. The scout ships reacted immediately. Their probability patterns shifted, attempting to predict and counter the defenders' movements. But there was nothing to predict. Each defender's course was genuinely random, guided by human intuition rather than mathematical precision. Their quantum coherence is fluctuating, Park reported excitedly. The randomness is forcing them to collapse into definite states. All ships, weapons free, Sarah ordered. Hit them while they're solid. Space lit up with quantum energy as the defenders opened fire. The scouts' advanced technology meant they could still shift partially out of phase, but they couldn't maintain full superposition while evading the chaotic attack pattern. For the first time, they were vulnerable. One of the scout ships disappeared in a cascade of quantum collapse as multiple hits forced its probability wave to collapse destructively. The others began to retreat, their perfect formation broken by uncertainty. They're transmitting, Katsumi announced, his voice strained from processing the quantum data. Massive energy spike. They're calling the main fleet. The galactic display blazed with new signatures as the invasion fleet arrived far ahead of schedule. Thousands of probability ships dropped out of quantum slip, their combined quantum field so powerful it distorted the station's sensors. By the void, Crystal pulsed, its patterns shifting to frequencies Sarah hadn't seen before. Their fleet, it's not just in quantum superposition. They're quantum entangled, moving as one consciousness. Sarah watched the enemy fleet's approach, her mind racing. One consciousness, one quantum state. Crystal, what happens to an entangled system when you disrupt any part of it? The Nexian's patterns surged with understanding. The entire system is affected. But the energy required to disrupt a field that size. We have energy, Sarah said. Every quantum drive in the fleet overloaded simultaneously. Hark's modifications let us push them past theoretical limits, if we time it right. The blast would likely destroy our fleet as well, Crystal noted, its patterns somehow conveying both concern and determination. Some of us, Sarah acknowledged, but not all. And Earth. We'll never face them alone, Crystal finished. Its patterns shifted to command frequencies. We support this plan. For order, for chaos, for survival. The next minutes were a blur of preparation. Every ship in the combined fleet adjusted their quantum drives, pushing the modifications past all safety limits. Engineers, human and Nexian, worked frantically to squeeze every last bit of power from their systems. The enemy fleet approached in perfect formation, their probability patterns forming fractal patterns of overwhelming beauty and terror. They were order and chaos perfected through millions of years of evolution, come to impose their perfection on younger races. All ships in position, Rivera reported. Enemy fleet entering optimal range. Sarah took a deep breath, looking around the command center at humans and Nexians working as one. Whatever happened next, they'd already achieved something unprecedented. Send the signal. Through their quantum network, modified by human chaos theory and Nexian precision, the Defender fleet acted as one. Every quantum drive overloaded simultaneously, but not in harmony. Each one failed differently, randomly, creating a cascade of quantum disruption that rippled out across space. The enemy fleet's perfect quantum coherence worked against them. As the chaotic disruption wave hit their entangled system, it propagated instantly through their entire network. Ships began to phase in and out of reality as their quantum superposition collapsed unpredictably. Their quantum field is destabilizing, Park shouted over the sound of straining systems. The chaos it's exponential. Sarah watched in awe as the massive enemy fleet began to tear itself apart, their advanced technology unable to handle the fundamental uncertainty they'd introduced. Ship after ship collapsed into normal space, their quantum systems fritzing and failing. The combined Defender fleet didn't escape unscathed. Nearly half their ships suffered drive failures, some catastrophically. But they'd achieved what they'd set out to do. Proved that chaos and order together could overcome even quantum perfection. Hours later, as rescue operations continued and the remaining enemy ships retreated in disarray, Sarah stood with Crystal in the station's observation deck, watching the cleanup efforts. They will return, Crystal noted, its patterns thoughtful. Perhaps in years, perhaps in centuries. They will learn from this defeat. And we'll learn from this victory, Sarah replied. Humans and Nexians, chaos and order, evolving together. Imagine what we'll achieve by then. Crystal's patterns shifted to that new configuration that bridged their species' differences. We have already achieved something unprecedented, Commander Chen. We have proved that the universe's greatest constant is change itself. Sarah smiled as she watched human and Nexian ships working together to rescue stranded crews and salvage advanced technology. That's a lesson worth any price. Indeed, Crystal pulsed. Though perhaps next time you visit our space, you could use the proper entrance protocols. Sarah laughed, and for the first time, she saw Crystal's patterns ripple in what was unmistakably shared amusement. Somewhere out there, The enemy fleet was regrouping, evolving, preparing for their next attempt. But they would find something different waiting for them. Not just humans, not just Nexians, but something new. Something that understood that the greatest strength comes not from perfection, but from the willingness to change, to adapt, to embrace both chaos and order in equal measure. A new dawn was rising for both their species, and somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, other intelligences would learn to fear the unlikely alliance they'd sparked into being.